Hello and welcome to the Talking Equality Speaker Series. My name is Marcus Stevenson and I work with the Office of Equality at Salesforce. It's going to be me taking you on this journey month in and month out. Now, some of you might recognize the brand Talking Equality, but for those who don't, we aspire to bring in champions and leaders to discuss topics related to diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality. These guests typically represent our equality group program at Salesforce. This is essentially our version of an employee resource group or a business resource group. Now, today, we celebrate our first episode. Well, we're actually calling it episode 0 because technically we're going behind the scenes. We've got a special show for you today. We will hear from our program team that supports our equality groups through a business resource group model. So let's kick off. All right. I'd love to just start off by going down the line and having all of our guests introduce themselves.
Cool. I'm Gino Ramos. Pronouns are he, him. Role is the Director of Office of Equality Programs, BRGs, and I'm based out of Los Angeles.
Hi, my name is Kristen Kaufman. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a manager in the Office of Equality for the BRG Program, and I'm located in Portland, Oregon.
Hi, my name is Amanda Ray Barbosa Barella. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers, and I serve as a BRG program specialist in the Office of Equality. And I'm based out of Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Awesome. Let's jump straight into the equality group program. Gino, I'll shoot the first question over to you. Can you give us an idea of just how big this program you manage is here at Salesforce and what it's like working with and empowering these employee-led groups?
Yeah, so this program is over 10 years old. Salesforce Women's Network, our very first equality group, started back in 2008, and I helped co-found back in 2009 or 10 for Outforce, which is our second group. And ever since, we've grown to about 13 global groups across the world, 300 hubs so far and growing. Over 50% of our worker base participates in at least one or more of the groups. That's over 40,000 workers here at Salesforce that are identifying in the communities or are allies to the communities. It's just really, really interesting to see over time and tenure here just how this program has grown and has put its tendrils in through a lot of different pieces within the company where the groups are being used as consultants. They're there to test things out. They're there to be focus groups. They're there to kind of champion employee engagement as well as help and educate people about what's going on in their communities. Global program as it is, did start off really, really small in San Francisco to what it is today globally. But again, these leaders are volunteer-based. These are people that are passionate about their communities and efforts that their communities are trying to make. And so having these employees that are passionate about it has just been just a real joy to see, to be honest, because I think it's part of the reason why I do a lot of this work. Also, in terms of just general evolution of the program, we've evolved it from an employee resource group framework to a business resource group framework. So that's really kind of led us to have a little bit more deeper connection with business impact and the priorities of the business. The groups have been doing a lot of this stuff already, so it's not too surprising because product innovations, policies, benefits programs, all these other things that they've already been plugged into, we now want to recognize those more with more metrics and KPIs. So that's a way to really prove the impact of these groups and the evolution that they've seen over the past decade of their growth.
Absolutely. And Gino, you touched on this employee resource group to business resource group shift. And I want to table that for now. I want to come back to that because that's super important. But one of the things that I can't seem to get over is just how big that program is, right? For such a huge company, a global company, over 50% of folks in the company participating. Kristen, I want to send this one to you. So Gino touched on how big this program is and also mentioned that it's a global program. How do you lean into a global mindset to ensure engagement outside of America, especially for programs that have started in San Francisco?
Yeah, I think it's been a long journey, and I think going global is always a long journey, and it's never an easy one. I think I've had this question from other companies and asking us how we've done this, and I think that they wish that there was like a magic wand to be like, it's global and everything works and it's perfect and everything moves from America to the global scale easily. But that's not the case. It takes a lot of work to meet people where they're at in each of those countries and cultures. And that's what we've done. We have country CEOs. We have resources that are located in those countries because all of us on this team are based in Amer, and we have a lot of knowledge, and we are global citizens and understanding the context of diversity and inclusion within a global sphere. But we were all born in America, in the United States, and we'll never be born in a different country and fully understand those cultures. So we really have to rely on those folks that are in those countries and have an understanding of the context of diversity and inclusion within those spaces. So we have a lot of participation on a global scale, like you said, 50%. So a lot of our folks are in other countries. So language barriers, paying in different currencies, all of those things. It's just making sure that your programs are scalable to those larger spaces and making sure that the details are there when you are transferring or trying to superimpose these things on different areas. But it really is relying on those folks that have the expertise and humbling yourself, knowing that you don't know everything, and always being open to learning more and adjusting when needed. When someone says, hey, this doesn't fit, this might not work right, and listening to that and honoring that, and always making sure that we're listening to the folks in those places. So I think that is a big thing, the localization with a global mindset.
I love that. And I would imagine that being, if not one of the biggest, maybe the biggest challenge that industry is facing, right? And not copy and pasting certain things into different regions and really doing it thoughtfully. So that leads me to thinking, and A-Ray, I'll ask you, what does success look like, right? How do we improve our odds of having a successful program, especially for maybe smaller companies or organizations who are looking to tackle something like this?
Absolutely. Great question. And I think a good segue from Kristen's answer is starting with intention and purpose. So we here at Salesforce, we have a Salesforce company and corporate goals. We call them the V2 Mom. And so vision, values, methods, measures, and obstacles that individuals and our different units without the company will develop every single year. Well, our quality groups do that as well, in alignment with corporate and the Office of Quality V2 Moms. So first, it's starting with what are your goals? What are your KPIs? And even speaking the language of the business as well. And then from there, moving into what is going to be resonating with folks' constituents, with their members. How are they getting feedback from folks? Whether it's something that's going on in the world, whether it's something that's going on locally, as Kristen mentioned, how important it is to localize initiatives, and then bringing folks together. Allyship is also a key foundation to the work that we do. So not only how are you finding spaces to advocate and to advance equality, but now how are you also bringing members who are allies to build their education, build their awareness, give them a space to have impact? That's a huge way in which we're able to drive program and success as well. And in addition to that is keeping, where we can, multiple identities and intersectionality in mind. So if there's opportunities for our equality groups to partner with each other, right? Or to partner with different units throughout the business. Right now, a big topic is AI. So why not incorporate that conversation with leaders in the field that might be identified as Latino or Black or LGBTQ, and elevating those voices to give different spaces and show that influence of our multiple communities. And one of the last things I want to highlight too is at Salesforce, we have one of our sayings is business is the greatest platform for change. And so volunteering and opportunities to give back to the community are huge. And our quality groups are a major foundation, a key foundation, not a foundation rather, but avenue for our employees to get involved, get connected with each other, and also get connected with their community. And it's incentivized as an organization to do that as well. So leading with that, then we have to demonstrate our metrics or data. What are the volunteer hours that are putting out? How are we raising funds? How is this connecting to mentorship and guidance? And this all comes back to our four pillars of people, performance, culture, and community, which is our foundation within the BRG model, people being professional development, supporting recruitment, retention, recognition, performance being that connection to the V2 mom, supporting business priorities and process improvement, activations, culture being senses of belonging and activations that bring together inclusion, systematic change, engagement within the office, and then community again being connected to our volunteering, service, philanthropy, etc. So there are many pieces that go into making an event successful, but it needs to be relevant to your membership. And then also our biggest success is when we can make it relevant to the business and where we're at today.
And when you mentioned making it relevant to the business, and you said a couple of things that really led me to this point around allyship, around mentorship, around connecting it to the business. While I have you, A-Ray, could you talk a little bit about leadership and how you think about or how you go about getting buy-in from leadership? I would imagine that's a super important piece to this big puzzle.
Absolutely. And I think that we'd be failing our communities if there was just the three of us that were guiding these groups, right? We can't possibly know everything. And I think Maya Angelou's quote that I always love to say is, when you know better, you do better. So the more that we're bringing leadership in to advise the process of these equality groups, the better. So we formalize that in a few different ways. So first is that you do have an actual full-time staff team here, as well as some of our leadership that provide advisement and guidance throughout the year, both day-to-day programmatic as well as vision setting. Each of our equality groups, so our 13 BRGs, business resource groups, also have executive advisors who are VP plus and executive sponsors. So these are folks that are sitting down, they're spending time with our global board leaders, helping them develop their V2 mom, again, what are their goals for the year, helping them also level set too, and think about how they're gonna globalize that. And then on the hub level, our hub leaders, leader boards also have advisors that can walk them through the process. Now, this not only makes sure that we are being able to measure what our impacts are, we're staying relevant, we're staying true. These leaders also have access and resources and insights into what would help set up our hubs for success. So that connection to our leaders, directors, VPs, etc., is really setting folks up for success to think bigger and broader. Our leaders are also helping us with storytelling and guidance. They're making connections of their own personal identities, their growth and development, whatever that may be, to the groups that they're supporting, right? So they're demonstrating also their demonstration or their growth in understanding equality. They are at times sharing the challenges and the opportunities that they've had, and not just always challenges, but what are the opportunities that come with your identities that maybe give insight of doing things a little bit different, but driving success. And they're also providing a platform for our equality group and BRG members and leaders to have a platform to tell their story and to drive that change as well.
I absolutely love that. And if you're a business leader, if you're an employee, you're looking to get an employee resource group, a business resource group going or growing, I'm hoping that you're taking notes, because A-Ray basically just gave you the formula. We tabled something earlier, Gino, something that you mentioned that I wanted to make sure I got back to. Essentially, it's this idea that most of the industry, at least from my experience, I've heard lean into an employee resource group model. And that's something that we're used to hearing. It's something I'm used to hearing. But you mentioned a business resource group model. You talked a little bit about that shift. I'm curious if you can take us through a little bit more about what that looks like and what that feels like.
Yeah, I think when you look at the models of just employee resource groups in general, you kind of have them in three different phases. Kind of what we've seen from a model is affinity groups, where they're not really supported by the business. They're just groups that are just growing organically within the company through whatever communication systems or networking systems they have as employees. Then you move them to an employee resource group model or an ERG model, where there's a little bit more structure and support from the business, whether that's resourcing from a staff like ours, resources like budget and other types of business processes that could support them, to what the final kind of maturation stage that we see a lot more formal programs like ours are turning into a business resource group, where there is much more connection back to the business impact, like my teammates have been saying. And so, like I mentioned before, we've seen a lot of the factors of what a BRG in terms of impact looks like already through what the employee resource groups were before. And we're just kind of now saying, why not? Why can't we just shift it already? We want to keep on that alignment with the business, where we're going as a company. We've seen the V2 moms of our leaders every single year. It's all about productivity, efficiency, business impact. And those things are very, very critical to what the business is doing, but should also be important for the groups themselves. Yes, they're going to keep on serving the employee base when it comes to resources, support, community. All those pieces are still there, just like our pillars were illustrated by A-Ray earlier. But we also want to make sure we are catering to the business as well, right? Like, we are part of the business. We are working in a for-profit company. That's the company that funds us, that resources us, that has brought us together, right? So we want to be able to make sure we are tending to that need, right? And as the company evolves, we want to partner with people in the business as well to make sure that these leaders and these members are getting opportunities to operate better in the business, but also for themselves. And so we've seen different things that have come from the equality groups over time that has affected the business greatly. One of them being the formation of the Office of Ethical and Humane Use that had happened because of an incident that we saw with Latino Force at one point in time, specifically with the US government, and seeing some actions there that we wanted to kind of take some lead on and see what can we do to make our products more ethical and used in a more ethical way. Then there's the Office of Accessibility, our Ability Force group, people with disabilities and their allies. They said, how come we don't have an Office of Accessibility that can support the general accessibility needs and accommodations that the company needs, instead of always going to the employee resource group to support, right? That should be a formal function. And so that office was formed. Product inclusivity, there's different features that are released in our core products because Outforce, for instance, had recently helped with making sure that gender identity and pronoun marketers are optional in our base products now, right? And then there's also like benefits programs. I think there's so many different pieces there internationally, depending on your culture, where you're going to need these groups to provide feedback because they're the employees that are going to be affected by this. Why not use them as a focus group, as a consultant to that specific arm of the business? There's been so many countless other items that have been done over time, specifically because of these groups. And we just want to make sure we recognize it, like I said. And how do we do that? Trying to figure out what those metrics are, understanding what KPIs can be built, how can we actually keep on tracking it, is really that evolution into that BRG framework so that we can show, which I think a lot of companies have hard times with, is what is the ROI of a program like this? How can I measure it? How can I prove the value? How can I say that all that money and all those resources we're pouring into this program are benefiting us, right? And that's where we're moving to. That's what we're trying to measure. And obviously create that clear business objective when it comes to helping this company in general. So that's really what the point of moving to BRG is really just that recognition, get those metrics, formalize it in a way. Don't forget, obviously, about the culture aspect, the employee aspect, but there is a business aspect to it where we have a value add, whether companies like it or not.
Of course, of course. And those are wonderful examples. And from those examples, it shows so clearly that what we're now calling business resource groups have been business resource groups for a long time, have been impacting the business. Now it's being just much more thoughtful about the language that we're using. And I think that is so powerful. You know what, Kristen, I want to kick this back to you, because Gino essentially told this story, right, of an employee resource group to a business resource group and what that looks like. I'd love to hear from you what advice you might have for other companies trying to take, whatever they have now and take it to the next level, whether it's an affinity group, whether it's an employee resource group, whether they're already impacting the business and might just not have formalized it quite yet. What are your thoughts on that, Kristen?
Yeah, I love this question because my journey at Salesforce was actually through an acquisition about 2.5 years ago. And at that company, I started their employee resource group program. So my journey was starting a program. And I think that a lot of people struggle with where to start and what the next steps are. And I think it's really, truly figuring out where your population is at. Salesforce is very advanced, and I think a lot of people see Salesforce and want what Salesforce has, but you can't boil the ocean, right? As we like to say. And if you have seen recent news, there's been a lot of companies who have tried to commit to diversity and inclusion and equality efforts, especially after the murder of George Floyd. That was a big uptick in diversity and inclusion and equality efforts. And a lot of those have started dropping off because I think a lot of people maybe shot too far. And you can't force diversity, inclusion, and equality on people. They have to be ready for that change. So specifically for when I was starting the Employee Resource Group program, I had to start with very basic education because we were all using different terminology. People didn't know what the word term ally meant, and people didn't know what pronouns were for. At Salesforce, I think we sometimes take that for granted because it is so ingrained in our culture. Other companies see that and like, how do I get to there? It's so many steps ahead. So I think it's, like I said, meeting folks where they're at and figuring out what that next step is that you can push the envelope a little bit and make sure that you're still bringing people along. So if it's in the beginning, maybe it's doing a lot of education. If you already have an established program and you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm tracking all of these events on spreadsheets and they're all free events and we're really struggling with what the next step is, maybe it's funding your program, which not everyone likes to hear, but funding is an important piece of our program, and it can be an important piece of the next step of your program. So it's also having that leader buy-in that A-Ray talked about is really, really important because you can only get so far with grassroots efforts. And having the company support and realizing, as Gino said, the business impact that you can have, whether it's something that's very kind of easy to see is benefits. Maybe you're advising on benefit programs, or maybe you're advising on the products that you have, like we do at Salesforce. The pronoun implementation within Salesforce products, that was an employee resource group doing that work. So it's really dependent upon where you're at in your journey. And I think that there's so many versions of this quote, but it's diversity is having everyone in the room, and inclusion is everyone gets an equal seat at the table. If you're not even at the diversity piece yet, then you maybe need to start on that, right? And if you're at the diversity piece, it's inclusion, and then it's equality. And there's a lot of natural steps forward in the progression, but it's matching what you have the ability to do in your business with the needs of your population. So I think that that's, a really big piece is catering to the business. Gino said we're always catering to the business, especially if you're a for-profit company. For-profit is always the first piece. For-profit company. The for-profit doesn't exist without the company, right? So you need to make sure that you are paying attention to how your groups and your program fits in with that business. They are only going to fund you if they see the impact, right? So make sure that impact is clear. And that I think is the biggest way to understand the progression of where affinity groups, employee resource groups, whatever it might be, what that next step can be for you at whatever company it is.
Absolutely. No, that's super impactful. And I think that, another thing to mention is the fact that maybe if you're starting from scratch, you're starting from absolutely nothing, a grassroots effort can take something off the ground, and it could be any one of us, right? It can be anyone who has that passion, has that drive. 100%, Gino's a wonderful example of that, to see something that you started once upon a time, graduate and become something so big. With that being said, we're getting close to time, but I do have one more question for you all. I can't not ask this question because I'm sitting down with such an inclusive team in and of yourself. So I'm curious about the dynamics of your team and also the dynamics of employee resource groups. You talked a lot about allies, bringing allies along on the journey, bringing leaders along on the journey. How does having an inclusive team or inclusive teaming play into the dynamics of your program team and also the success of the business resource group program? I'd love to get like a sound bite from each of you, if that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can kick us off. Absolutely. And I think, Gina, Kristen, and I were all US based. So that is definitely even I have family that live outside of the US, but this is my born experience, right? And so while I can pull from that, I also have to see where my gaps of knowledge, information, lived experiences are. So I think we work together and often talk about humility. We're open to saying oh, I don't know, or that's a really good point. And I think with that too, is being learners, like commitment to learning as well. So whether that is knowing a platform and being invested as folks who live in a tech company or it feels like that way sometimes, but work in a tech company, how do we know our own platform as well and make those connections to equality? Or whether it is recognizing my role as an ally to a colleague on a call, or as a support and my positionality in calls as well. I think that is huge. And learning both as equality groups and the formation of, a BRG program or employee-led resource group, whether the group itself or an actual program. As a marathon runner, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint, right? So it is literally taking time and advancing and sequencing that development over time, which really helps with, not feeling that burnout, taking time to pause, reflect, understand, and even measure where you're at, where you've been, and then where you need to go. And I think with that, as a team, when we talk about inclusiveness, again, we lead with humility, we lead with metrics, and we lead with a curiosity to learn more and to be open when we're called out that we can do better. So.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. I think that the humble piece is really, really important, and we all really share that as a core identity. I think all of us try as much as possible to be as educated as possible about all of the topics that we're covering, but we have 13 equality groups that we're serving, and we don't identify with every single one of those groups. Fortunately, all of us identify as queer, which is the first time I've ever been on a team or had a manager that was the same identity in that sense. So I think we all come to the table with that similar experience, but we have different gender identities, different ethnicities. We're from different places. We grew up very differently. So the diversity of thought and those aspects, I think, bring us together in a way that allows us to understand and empathize with people's experiences. So having that shared queer experience and having the differences that we do have paired with the humble, I feel like I'm making like a recipe right now, but I think that is really the key to success for our group and for any employee resource group. I think it's so important to have that diversity, but coming together over certain shared experiences is really important. And this job it's not easy. We deal with a lot of topics that are very near and dear to people's hearts. And it takes a lot of emotional energy, and we're really supportive of each other in that way. And I don't think that we would be able to do it if we didn't have that support from the team, and just the uniqueness of that shared experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put, I guess, whipped cream on the recipe then when it comes to it. But I think when it comes to this space, specifically when it comes to anything D&I related, I don't think what people realize, and this kind of touches on what Kristen mentioned, I don't think people realize the heaviness that a lot of the tone and topics are, because a lot of the reasons why our marginalized communities come together in a lot of cases is through collective trauma or oppression, suppression, repression. And you have to have enough of a thick skin to run a program like this, because you're dealing with people's personal issues on top of work issues. It is the marrying of the two. And to have that knowledge and to understand that you're going to be playing in a space where heartstrings are going to be tugged every single time, and you're not going to have everybody 100% on the same page or aligned with you, you have to be ready to know how to handle that, but also drive towards a common goal and hopefully build the bridges appropriately to move forward, knowing that not everybody's going to be pleased. So it's very, very real when it comes to this work. It's very exhausting. I don't think people realize that either, that this can eat away at your soul in certain ways. I've said that many times to the equality group leaders, that this is hard work. Are you ready for it? Because it is not just parades, swag, food, cultural events. It is much more than that. And I think when people realize that, they understand there's a need for focus, there's a need for creating real impact, long-lasting impact, and it's not a fast road. It never is. You've seen how social movements work in the world today. They do not happen overnight. These things happen step by step, day by day. Fresh start over, different everything. Yeah. So yes. A lot of work, but humbling work, great work, impactful work. And this team, world class. So really, really proud of how our company has done it, how our team has done this, and hopefully our employees and our equality groups do as well.
Absolutely. And typically, if it's easy, it's not always worth it, right? So I want to thank you so much for the work that you do day in and day out, and also for joining us today and allowing us to shed a little bit of light into your day to day. Gino, Kristen, and A-Ray, thank you so much. Be sure to join us next month for episode 1, a session with our Latino Force Equality Group.